Hi, Kim Fairminer here to talk to you today about the upcoming solar eclipse in Cancer. So whether you're in the northern or the southern hemisphere, the solstice is a time of extreme light or extreme shadow. For me, on the subtropical east coast of Australia, the sun's ingress into Cancer marks the depths of a fairly mild winter. You can see I'm wearing something fairly light today. But if you live closer to the equator, you're probably not going to notice this seasonal fluctuation much, if at all. If you're closer to the poles, this seasonal fluctuation, whether that's winter in the south or summer in the northern hemisphere, is going to, be really, really pronounced. So this year, the sun's movement into Cancer at the solstice coincides with a solar eclipse, and that's going to intensify your experience of this natural time of extremity. So Cancer's cardinal sign, they're instigators. If you think of the Cancerians in your life, they're definitely not pushovers, are they? They might not say much, particularly now with Mercury retrograde about to happen in Cancer, and we'll talk a bit more on that later, but they're certainly going to get their point of view across, even if they don't use words. So Cancers are water sign ruled by the moon, and they initiate emotional intimacy, that sense of belonging. That's Cancer's superpower. So with a solar eclipse always occurs at a new moon, and that's the time when the moon can eclipse the power of the sun when they're together in the sky. They occupy that same little bracket of sky, and they only do this at the new moon. So the moon's not visible in the sky, and she doesn't emit any light of her own. So the sun's light, when they're that close together, blinds our visibility of the moon. But of course, every moon isn't a solar eclipse. A solar eclipse only happens when the new moon is close to the nodes of the moon. So what are the nodes? They're the points that the moon crosses the ecliptic when it moves from north to south. So when it moves from south to north at the north node, that's also called the dragon's head. And then when it kind of dips back down, when it's journeying around the earth from the northern half to the southern half of that ecliptic, that happens at the south node, and that's called the dragon's tail. And this dragon, it's a lively beast and disturbs the lives of humans. So as the north node has recently moved into Gemini, remember that's the dragon's head that's come into Gemini, this solar eclipse in Cancer is the last one in the series of the Cancer-Capricorn axis. So while we've got the north node in Gemini, it's at the very end of Gemini, and this solar eclipse is at the start of Cancer. So even though they're across signs, they're very close together. And this solar eclipse coincides with a really important time of the solar year because it's happening at the time of the solstice. So this eclipse is big. So eclipses are really important in mundane astrology, and mundane astrology has enjoyed a bit of a resurgent popularity at the moment. There's been some major planetary alignments in Capricorn, and that's associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, and all those changes at the socioeconomic and geopolitical level. There's definite contraction to the way we're living our life this time that we're on Earth. So eclipses bring rapid socio-political change, and particularly in the regions where the eclipse is visible. So this particular eclipse coming up will be most influentially felt through Central Africa, where it starts, and then it travels across the Arabian Peninsula through Pakistan, North India, Tibet, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and a little place in the Pacific called Guam. So the changes brought about by solar eclipses are more enduring than the changes brought about by a lunar eclipse. That's because the sun travels a lot slower than the moon through the zodiac. And if this eclipse activates any points or planets in your birth chart, you can expect some significant disruption into your life. So don't freak out at the word disruption. It's not necessarily a bad thing, although human nature tends to be really quite resistant to change. It's just how we're built. We like things to be predictable because that means we know where our next meal comes from, where we can find water, things like that. It's important to our survival to keep things fairly steady. So when something things get unpredictable, we tend to freak out and panic. Anyway, don't panic. So this eclipse is activated by the North Node, the dragon's head, remember? And this means it's the conscious end of the dragon. And it's considered to be oriented towards growth and also prosperity. So the way I see eclipses is as a portal, like a temporary opening between important chapters of your life. And sometimes we're unceremoniously sucked through to a new reality that may not be of our own choosing. But sometimes, like with this one, you can choose to make changes with that conscious awareness. Remember, the head is where the brain is. So we've got a degree of agency that we can use here. Although no eclipse is optional. We all get them somewhere in our chart. So we'll go into sign by sign solar eclipse horoscopes in a little while, but I wanted to talk about the moon. So as I mentioned earlier, Cancer's ruled by the moon. And the moon's influence here is further emphasized because the moon is in her sign of rulership. So the moon's associated with our feelings, our physical bodies, our subconscious desires, and where and how we find nourishment. So Cancer's traditionally the sign of the home, family, security, and particularly in the sense of that emotional belonging and community. So with the moon strong in her home sign, obscuring the sun, because that's what happens at an eclipse, there's a shifting of both the solar and the lunar cycles at the same time. So there's a powerful lunar drive for those communal home feeling based topics to come into your conscious awareness and for external changes to be initiated on those internal needs. So something that perhaps, you've pushed aside and, while you've been going about doing your job, making dinner and doing the shopping and things, like, all those outward tangible things that you do kind of like can distract us from our deeper inner soul needs. But these are what's going to be coming to the fore at this eclipse. So the word solstice actually means that the sun stands still. And that describes the 3 days at these solstice points that the sun moves no further north or south, depending on the hemisphere and the time of year, before moving back in the other direction. So it's kind of like a bit of a U-turn. The sun pauses at the edge before initiating the new season. So there's another 2 planets that are also essentially standing still in the zodiac during the week of the solar eclipse. That Mercury retrograde will start just 2 days before the solar eclipse. So that's happening at 15 degrees Cancer, and that further emphasizes those Cancerian themes. Venus is also moving really slowly at the end of her retrograde cycle in Gemini, and she stations direct a few days after the eclipse. So Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, and remember that's where we find the North Node. So there's this dynamic conversation between that changeable intellectual approach of Gemini and the initiating emotional activity of Cancer. So there's some really interesting things happening there. So some of the themes that you might see emerging is a consideration of parental bonds, but also your sibling and peer relationships. If you think about your alliances, who are your allies? And what are these alliances based on? The emotional intimacy of shared experience, community, or perhaps it's more the curious novelty of transactional exchange, commerce. Anyway, such themes play out between countries as well as individuals. Who's playing with who and why? Is there a parent-child dynamic, or is it more of a relationship between equals? So while community sounds lovely and, there's that notion of harmonious togetherness, we all know community isn't always like that. Not everybody wants to stay in the safety of that familiar nest. Some people want to choose the freedom to have new experiences. And some, mothers, mother figures, motherlands don't like that. So with that North Node now in Gemini, there is an increasing hunger for facts and information and a desire to share information and intelligence. So let's go around the zodiac and check out what is happening in your chart. So you can take this information based on your rising sign if you know it, or your sun sign if you're not sure of your time of birth. So for Aries, the solar eclipse happening in the 4th house, and this brings a sense of a clean slate for you domestically. The eclipses have been happening across the Cancer Capricorn axis for quite a while, so this process has been an ongoing, and this is like kind of like, you know, a final blasting, a final clearing out of this sector, particularly if you've got a planet or point down there. So this is a new chapter for Aries in the realm of home and family life. You might move house or discover something interesting about your ancestors. For Taurus, the solar eclipse takes place in your 3rd house, and this gives you a mental clean slate. You can shake up your mindset and your ways of thinking and lay down some fresh possibilities. It's also a great time to consider how you communicate and express yourself, particularly with that Mercury retrograde coming up there as well. You can learn new tricks or reprise old ones. So for Gemini, the solar eclipse takes place in your 2nd house. This is a money house. So you're being offered a financial clean slate. You might find that there's a need to find a new source of income or something, or a more secure, predictable form of income, or make changes to your financial situation that better align with your personal priorities. If you're a Cancer, this happens in your 1st house, so it's a real personal clean slate. What do you want for yourself this lifetime? Have you been like taking on board the lessons of previous eclipses across this relationship me-we axis there? You might even discover something that you were hiding, maybe even from yourself. For Leo, this will happen in your 12th house, and you get a subconscious clean slate. The 12th house is rather a mysterious sector of the zodiac, or of the chart. And what I'm anticipating for Leos is the emergence of an inner process that is barely perceptible from the outside, but it requires you to withdraw into that inner silence, that sacred space within. You might also notice that there's a new sense of compassion for the most maligned and marginalized members of society. For Virgo, you get a collaborative clean slate as the solar eclipse occurs in your 11th house. This could manifest as changes to your group affiliations, networks, and friendships, and perhaps there's a degree of activism there as well. It can also spark up new hopes and dreams. Libra has the solar eclipse happening in the 10th house, and this gives a clean slate to your ambitions. So it's a great time to realign your career plans and possibly take on some further study, just drawing in those 9th house themes of Gemini there, and take the next steps. Like, where do you want to go? What goals are you going to set? What do you want to be recognized for? Scorpio has the solar eclipse happening in the 9th house, and this is a house that's associated with belief. It's really personal, so this is a cue for you to expand your mind and spirit and do so intuitively. Scorpio and Cancer are both water signs, so this won't necessarily be comfortable all the time, but you are totally ready to learn. So yeah, however you want to do it, through more practical face-to-face new experiences, or taking on a more formal course of study, that's the way to go, Scorpio. For Sagittarius, the solar eclipse happens in the 8th house, and this gives you a clean slate around your obligations and ideas of sharing. So shared financial concerns, could come up for you, and that could relate to how money is shared within your marriage or primary relationship, but also business partnerships and relationships like that with the tax office and things like that. So basically, whenever I see the 8th house, is get in there and do what needs to be done. The more you like worm and squirm and go, oh, I shouldn't, I've got dark feelings about that, just do it already. You know what you want. So Capricorn, in the 7th house, the solar eclipse will bring a clean slate to your partnerships. So this opens new relationship possibilities, which if you're single and felt a bit stuck there, this is a time to reach out and step a little bit into the unknown and Find your sense of home with somebody else. So you can explore and unpack your feelings on this one. Like, it's not about just what seems smart. There needs to be some alignment between your head and your heart. You can't just let one lead the way and drag the other one along. You know, they've got to work together cooperatively. Aquarius has the solar eclipse happening in the 6th house, and this brings a clean slate to your work and everyday routines. So the sense of disruption that the solar eclipses bring will likely happen at work, but through that disruption, new daily routines emerge. So take care particularly of your health and well-being as well, because personal rituals around, you know, how we look after ourselves and structure our day, you know, it's what you do every day that creates your one big fabulous life. So this is a really great time for you, Aquarius, to, yeah, look at that, how the details make up the whole. For Pisces, the creative clean slate of the solar eclipse in your 5th house, it shows a new emotional atmosphere with children and your relationship to your inner child. It could also open up new directions for your recreational and artistic pursuits. It's really about like expressing yourself. You know, from little things, big things grow. So there you have it. That's the solar eclipse horoscopes for you. I hope that's given you some food for thought about what's coming up in June, and that you step through this portal with love and wisdom and a degree of awareness about who you are and where you want to go. If you'd like to meet with me in a private consultation and unpack this like in detail, we can get amazing information. Yeah, just message me and we can take it from there. And please subscribe so you don't miss my next update. Okay, happy eclipsing.